cloud, and here we go. So welcome to this fifth and penultimate installment of the NEHIM's Data Governance Community of Practice. This session is on master and reference data. And here we are on the penultimate, and the next one is data quality. That one's going to be on June 16th. Housekeeping, as we have done every session, please raise questions via the chat window. And also through the chat, when we are asking for people to share their stories, please ask to speak through the chat and you will be acknowledged. So this slide comes with every session. What is data governance? And it's orchestration of people, processes, and technology. I always minimize the technology because without the people and the processes, the technology won't do you a single bit of good. And it's managing the company's critical data assets. You know, as we said, when you have a fleet of trucks, you have to make sure you set up a maintenance program for those trucks. So when you have data, you should have a maintenance program for your data. So here we are today. We're going to talk about master and reference data. And I apologize, this one, here it is. There it is. First of all, a description of master data, because I think it's important to know what it is if you're going to manage it. And how can master data management save you a boatload of money? And then we're going to talk about reference data, which is equally important, and how it differs from master data. And we'll go into the activities. So what is master data? Master data is the data about the entities that are critical to your business. And what are we talking about? Critical entities. Well, those are the things that comprise a business transaction. What do I mean by that? Let's just jump right into some examples. So example one is a simple sale, right? A sale, which is a transaction, it's a business transaction, consists of a product that's being sold to a customer according to a price schedule by a sales rep and delivered to a customer location. And all of these can be considered master data because they comprise the transactions. Second, a patient encounter. So an encounter is a patient being seen by a provider in some location in order to have a procedure, and it's paid for by a particular payer under a certain payer plan. Next example, cable TV transaction. You know, so Comcast, it consists of a set of services delivered to a customer by an installer at an address. And the reason I chose this one is because master data varies by the business that you're in. So most of us, I believe, when we talk about address, the address is an attribute of a patient or a customer or a salesman or a vendor, right? It's an attribute of a person. But to the cable industry, it's master data because the wires don't go to a person, the wires go to an address. And it's important for the cable company to know if that address is in a multi-tenant unit, if it's a single family home, if there's a vicious dog there, right? So all of this data about an address is important to a cable company, but not necessarily to anybody else. So what your master data actually is can vary widely. So here are some examples of what typical master data sets could be. So consultant contracts. I have a lot of people here: employees, customers, patients, retirees, applicants. And you may think, well, you know, do I want to make manage masters of each of these, or maybe I just want a people master, right? Because people can be both employees and patients and retirees and applicants and donors, right? So you might want to look bigger and say, all right, we're going to manage the people in our organization. Some other things, marketing targets, right? Not just your customers, but the people you really wish you had as customers. The applications that are in your data center or that are important to your business, outsourced to the cloud or whatever. So, your applications that you use could also be considered master data. They're critical to your business. Locations, corporate locations, customer locations. If you receive grants, you may want to make a master of your grants and endowments. If you are in the business of delivering healthcare, clinical trials are something that you may want to have a master copy of. And whatever your procedures and services are and your products are, is a typical master data set. Along with suppliers, your items that you purchase, your vendors.
Welcome.
Okay, so why do you manage master data? So when you talk about master data management, usually what people think about is, I have 2 different CRM systems with customers, or I have a CRM system with my customer, and then I also have them in my ERP system, for invoicing. And if you have your master data sitting in one location being mastered and managed by a single group, you may not need to do anything, right? Other than acknowledge the fact, yep, this is master data. But typically when you have master data, you tend to have different business groups that might be using it in different ways in different systems. So an example, CRM, your marketing, sales, receivables, they all use customer, but they use it in different ways. And what this is causing is duplicative entry, because it's, the CRM folks are probably the ones who know a customer's current address. And, what are they doing? Sending out reports every week or something. And then the marketing, the sales, and the receivables have to key in the name, address, and contact. But really what receivables needs to know about a customer, right? Their critical piece of the customer is where to send the invoice and the credit worthiness of the customer, right? Sales might need to know the address. They might need to know, the name of the spouse, how many children that person has, what's the person's golf handicap, right? So each of these is using a customer, but using it in slightly different ways. And what's happening because of that is everybody has to type in the name and the address, right? What we are seeking to do is maybe avoid that. So why do you manage master data? Well, because when you have multiple people maintaining the same data, there's always going to be a battle of who's right. And I want to start out with an example of Hartford Healthcare's provider master. Basically, what we did was take the best of everyone's effort to maintain the data. So a provider is basically anybody who practices medicine. We tend to exclude registered nurses when we talk about providers, as well as LPNs, but this is the list of people who are providing the care to our patients. And in blue, on the left side of the blue, we have the internal systems that are maintaining data on providers. So ECHO is what our credentialing verification office uses, right? before any provider can provide any service to an HHC patient, that provider has to have all of his or her information verified, and then the medical staff has to give the okay for this provider to practice. So that's what Echo does, is it tracks that credentialing process. PeopleSoft is our ERP. We have not only employed providers in there, but also providers that are contingent workers. They're not employed by us, but they're affiliated with us. We have a system called Crimson Physician Relationship Manager. That's our marketing arm. These are the folks that are managing information on the provider. And if you go to Hartford Healthcare's website and do Find a Doc, the Find a Doc information is being fed from Crimson Physician Relationship Manager. So it's very important because the providers themselves, the docs, are looking at that website, and that information has to be correct. So we have another system called Apogee, and it is the provider roster for our clinical integration network. And then, of course, we have Epic, our EHR. But we've also supplemented it with data from the outside. We get a file from LexisNexis every month. LexisNexis is well, they started out as a legal research authority where they had, they held data for the legal business, but they've expanded into all kinds of things. And they send us a file of every provider in Connecticut, plus all of the counties in New York, Mass, and Rhode Island that border Connecticut. So we get an authority from LexisNexis. The National NPI Registry provides us data. We get some data from Aetna, and we get our residents and our fellows who work with us, are there people in training. We take all these sources, feed them into the master provider database to come up with the golden record, right? So when you are managing master data such as this, you're looking for the one record that you can say is the best of everybody's efforts. And from there, we feed into a number of our internal systems. And we also have quite a number of people who are using the data. They're looking up providers every day, or they're using segments of it for various purposes. And we have a lot of these users. So, when you think about master data management, if you go and you buy a book on master data management, a lot of them talk about using master data management techniques to fix the data as it goes into your data warehouse so that your analytics are clean. But HHC's goal, and the goal I would recommend, is fix the data in the source. If a classic example, we'll go back. When a provider first starts working for HHC, the credentialing and verification office has the best information on that provider. We don't have a relationship with the provider yet. The relationship actually starts in the CVO. 3 months down the road, the provider says, you know what, I'm not going to practice at the South Windsor location anymore. I'm going to practice in Glastonbury. The provider will usually call the Crimson folks, the physician relations people, and say, hey, I'm practicing in Glastonbury. Here's my new address. So now 3 months down the road, the CVO doesn't have the most accurate information. It's Crimson that has the most accurate address information. And so, I don't want to get a lot into the methods and the tools, but the tools do allow you to execute these kinds of rules. So how do you manage master data? Well, first you start with your applications inventory. I talked about that last month with the metadata management. And you should know what applications you have in your organization. And from those applications, you should know what master data that they're using. So, you may have to go to your stewards, you may have to go to the people who maintain the application. The second step, break the world up into contributors and subscribers. Because what you're going to find is, and we found this in providers, there are a lot of systems that are using providers and they're keying in provider information, but they really don't want to. The provider information is not coming into those systems. Those systems are not where the data are collected, created, or managed. They just need the data in order to get their work done, and those are subscribers. The systems like the ones that I listed on the previous slide, they are the ones who have direct contact with providers, and so therefore they're contributors. Third step is, once you've found your contributors, you have to get your contributing stewards to become your project team, right? Because what you're going to do is examine each contributor's workflow and then design a new workflow that eliminates redundancy. So once you've determined that, the address is known by the CVO before anybody else, but 3 months down the road, we need to get our addresses from our physician relationship manager, right? That kind of changes the game a little bit. And like I said, those rules can get documented. Please ensure that you document well those rules in English, because people are going to come back to you and they're going to say, why do we do that again? So once you've designed your rules, and there's two kinds of rules. There's match merge rules and there are trust rules. So let's start with match merge. One of the activities of managing master data from multiple locations is figuring out, if I have Dr. Smith in system A and Dr. Smith in system B, are they really the same person or are they different people? And usually, you could look at Dr. Smith, Dr. John Smith, and see that, Dr. John Smith has been practicing for 40 years. And there's another Dr. John Smith who sometimes goes as John Smith Jr., sometimes just goes as John Smith. That individual has been practicing for 5 years. They have different national identifiers, and you can say, oh, okay, these are not the same provider. So what you need to do is figure out with each system, what is in common in all of those systems that would allow you to know whether you have the same thing or a different thing. And then once we have established the match merge rules and we know whether it's all the same entity or different entities, you can apply what are called trust rules. The trust rules are what I just described. The address is best in the CVO initially, but really it's better in Crimson. So you can build that using a commercial product, or you can build that with a tool set of your choice if you're familiar with some of the business process automation software that's out there. Generally, the commercial products are using some kind of business process automation engine in the background, and they just put a nice slick GUI over the top where you can graphically see what these rules are. The tools will also allow you to determine what to do if something is not quite cut and dried. For example, if you're not sure whether these John Smiths are the same or different, and they generally do it by assigning a score. If you're not sure whether they're different, the tool will set that person aside, and an individual, a human, can later come along and change it. So, oh, I just went through all of this. So where's the payoff? Well, the first payoff is you're reducing or eliminating that redundant data entry. You know, if you can get the golden record from the master data management system out into the source systems, then you reduce, the source systems don't have to enter the data. And this is most, this is most palpable with subscribing systems, because they don't want to be typing in this master data. They have to, because they have to use it. The other reason is to reduce or eliminate adverse events. By managing this data so that you have the best quality based on the people's best efforts, you could find that you're going to reduce the number of times that a Men's Health flyer goes out to a number of women, or think of the adverse event where master data of bad quality could cause an embarrassment for your company. The other place where you get the payoff is you can highlight those data quality issues before they cause a problem. At HHC, we get this provider data from all 9 of those systems every single day. We start the process about 7 p.m. So we're starting it with, quote, the business of the day, unquote. And by 8:30, we're ready to start producing the output so that those systems can get that data. The other thing is that single ready source of that master data. You will watch the new use cases come in every single day, and we do at HHC for our locations and for our providers. So, at HHC, we did have an adverse event dealing with provider data that was not quite known too well, and we had to scramble to fix it. And, we were able to show that master data management could have taken care of the problem before it was a problem. So that's how we managed to get into that business. But like I've said, master data management does take a very high investment, right? You're creating a project team, you're creating a technical team to manage the technology part of this. And it's going to be ongoing, and it requires an investment. But once you're done, the payoff can be very, very big. Any questions so far? Let me check the chat. Ooh, the chat window is empty. I'll give it a couple seconds. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about reference data. So reference data is kind of like master data, but it's not really a business entity, right? It's that standardized data that you need throughout your organization, or a lot of reference data is industry-wide. A good example of industry-wide reference data is ICD. Another example is commodity codes, EEO codes, job codes from the Equal Employment Opportunity. So, a lot of times you are dealing with codes that are used to categorize things. So how do you recognize reference data? Well, I said categorizations, that especially if a category triggers a different event or a different workflow. For example, ICD-10 procedures, for every procedure, there's a different thing that you do, right? Also look for any data that's in drop-down list boxes or collected with radio buttons. Look for categorizations that have other data applied to them. I have a classic one in a minute about data applied to them. And also look at how are data commonly grouped for analytics output, for dashboards or for reports. And here's a classic, the date dimension. This is reference data. And basically all it is a table of every date, from the beginning of time to as far out as you want to go. And when I say, data that goes along with the code, well, the code is 2021-519. But then we'll also have the value in date format, and in a database, there's a special data format for dates that are different than other formats. And that date format allows you to do some special things to the data. Day of year. So what's the Julian day since January 1st? And today is 139. The calendar year. And that way, you don't have to run the functions that can pull the year out or, pull it out by parsing. Some other very useful things: the first day of the month, the last day of the month. How many days till the end of the month, or how many days since the beginning of the month. So if you're looking for things like that, and very often, you're looking at how far into the month are you, percentage of month, and these are values that can help you calculate that. And then the display name, the month and number form as well. What's the calendar quarter? What's the fiscal year? Okay, so Hartford Healthcare, our fiscal year starts October 1st. And so today it's in fiscal 2021, but it's in the third quarter of 2021, not the second quarter for fiscally. And this is period 8. And then some other things that you can put in. Is it a weekend or a holiday, or the day before a holiday, or the day after a holiday? What is the day of the week? Today is Wednesday. And then accompanying that, we have what is the index day of the week, with Sunday being 1 and Saturday being 7. The reason is you're going to show, volume by day of the week in a histogram, and you want to sort it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If you sort on the display, Friday is going to come first because it begins with an F. So what you do is you sort on the index and you display the day of the week. Occurrence in month. Today is the third Wednesday of the month. Week number, the fiscal week number. So, when you're managing reference data, these are things that you're looking for. And what you're really looking for is, how do you make it convenient for people who are consuming the data? This makes it very easy for somebody who's dealing with dates, to join and say, okay, give me the volume on Wednesdays and each Wednesday of the month. So now you have this available. You don't have to go in and calculate. You can just ask the question, and it makes it very simple for curation. So why do you manage reference data? Well, the contributors and the subscribers, they're still there. There are systems that are collecting or creating or managing this reference data. And there are systems where they're keying this stuff in because they have to. What we want to do is make this data easily accessible to all who need it. We also want to document changes. So reference data does change over time. ICD-10 codes change, fairly frequently. You can check on a monthly basis and see a change. And the other thing about change is that certain codes may be deprecated. They may be no longer used. However, you still need to keep them in your reference data set because you have transactions that you're going to be reporting on that require these things. But so you don't want to get rid of them, but you want to be able to say, this one is active, this one is not. We want to be able to maintain history as the reference data changes. And this could be important. It's very important in master data as well. And that's the concept of maintaining history. And I mean, I use healthcare a lot as an example because, those are the examples that I use when I speak to my management. But for example, we want to do a study. We see a number of lymphomas happening in a certain zip code. 15 years after some chemical spill in that zip code. So who are the patients who lived there 15 years ago? And this is why you would want to maintain the changes. So there are techniques that I am not going to go into on how you can maintain the history and identify this one's current, but if you want it the way it was 15 years ago, you can pretty easily go in and join against the reference data and get what it was 15 years ago. The other thing that you want to do with reference data is concentrate the maintenance. As I said, your contributors, your subscribers, everybody's keying this stuff in, and not everybody really cares about it. And if you can, reduce the number of people who are maintaining this reference data, number one, you're going to get better quality reference data because people aren't going to type things differently. And number two, you're going to save on the number of people who are actually having to maintain this. How do you manage reference data? Use a commercial reference data management system. And I'll be quite honest, I am scanning the world like Diogenes, looking for a good commercial reference data management system. And I have yet to find one. If anybody knows of one that is good and simple and doesn't break the bank, please share it with me. Share it with me on LinkedIn or something, because I'm really at a loss to find something that I think is simple enough to be useful and also will not break the bank and wipe out the cost savings of reference data management. However, until then, what we're doing is we're keeping a copy in a shared location. And what we're going to be doing is taking that copy and making it available in our data lake. As the data gets updated, we're going to use those techniques that I said I wasn't going to discuss to maintain the history and maintain the changes. Any questions before we go on to organization and activities? Quiet group today. So this slide we've used all the time. I'm sorry. previous. So we're talking about reference and master data. And, you know, we've seen this slide a lot. Data and application stewards are really the ones who take an active role, because they're the ones who know what the master data is and what the reference data is. And, you know, reference data, it may be maintained by a data steward. Master data is probably maintained by an application steward. And, you know, if you have a single point where the data is being managed, you don't have to worry about those MDM techniques in the commercial master data management software. For example, at HHC, we are pretty much all lined up under PeopleSoft. So we have a group that manages our vendors and our items. And so, you know, there's the single point of mastering. So what's the role of the master and reference data workstream? I apologize. I mean, I read this thing 12 times, and now I see my, I see where my misspellings are. So like every other, you have a work stream that prioritizes the domain remediation efforts and also get that adoption across the organization, right? Help us get the people to understand what it is we're trying to do, get the subscribers to adopt it, and to consume that data in as automated a fashion as possible. I mean, if it's not automated, here's a report of everything that changed yesterday or during the week. And, you know, you've now reduced the maintenance from having to go figure that out to just key this in if it's not possible to interface that data in. The accountabilities, well, align organizational resources. I keep saying master and reference data management is pretty costly. So, you know, you need somebody to say, yes, we should put the resources in that we need to do this. They will also assist the information governors with the data stewards and engagement to, you know, the folks who are closest to the data to be on that project committee. Escalate, you know, be the source of escalation when there's some issue with the stewards. And then any unresolved challenges can get escalated to the Data Governance Council. And of course, communicate and evangelize the program. And, you know, it's a very small commitment. It should be 4 hours a week or so, or 4 hours a month. The practice lead, the one who is creating the agenda and gathering, you know, that is more work. So the players, and, you know, this is month 5 of 6. So we know about the data domains work stream, right? That was session number 2. They set the prioritization of which data domains to govern and when. And when those data domains are beginning to be governed, then information governors will facilitate the efforts to identify that master and reference data set. The statement is a little bit simpler than the reality, right? Because, you know, the information governors are going to be over that entire domain, right? So this should be the person who has the utmost authority as to how we manage the master and reference data sets. And then the information governor will assign a data steward to manage each reference data set. And again, you probably have hundreds, if not thousands of reference data sets. Again, you prioritize, right? You manage the 20% that give the 80% of value. The information governors will assign stewards for each master data set. And what you're going to want is, you're going to want a steward who understands each system. You should have some representation from your subscribers, but generally, the data stewards you're really looking for are the ones who understand how the master and reference data are being managed in each system. So if you have 10 systems, you really want 10 stewards. And IT's role is to facilitate and implement the necessary technology. So some of the things that we've learned: master data management takes a long time. Allocate the time for it. Before we really got going, we must have spent a good 12 months, bringing together the data stewards, the people who are in charge of the systems, talking to them about who has the best data and when, who do you rely on. Don't focus on the technology. Really focus on the processing and the rules. If the processes and the rules are well defined, then the technology will come easily. And then once you get a success, advertise it and watch those use cases come in. Any other questions? All right, tales from the front. Does anybody have a story to share? And I mean, I could share our journey, but our provider master was what I used as the example. Oh, Abbott Cooper, sure, verbally, absolutely. I will. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're off mute. Go for it, Abbott.
I don't know if it's like half general story, half question, but I guess I found that in terms of math, so our provider records is the example that I'm thinking of without getting into too much detail, but you have the credentialing system. We're on Epic as well. And you have the credentialing system, the residents are not in there. That's from the graduate medical office. It's not as terrible as the grid that you had that had like 12 sources, but still, there's all sorts of stuff. There's a provider organization and so on. And I guess what I've found is that it's really hard to just sort of pull that together. So you'll wind up saying, if only we could get X entered over here, but that group has nothing to do with their job function. But if it was in there, that would be helpful. And people kind of balk at entering something for which they have no direct knowledge or responsibility. That's one example. Or it's just not a high priority, and you wind up for this other group over here, and I respect that. It's not that they're being recalcitrant. They just really they've got other things they must deal with that are higher priorities. So we wind up kind of cobbling something together and not doing it the best way. So I know this is really vague, but I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on sort of breaking through that. It's like everyone's got great intentions and then it doesn't quite come together and you wind up with this Frankenstein thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to say something that might sound simplistic, but if one group doesn't care, then maybe that's the wrong group to maintain that data. The group that cares might be the correct group. I could see where there'd be a conflict there because, the consumers of the data are the ones who really, really care. But they might not have the contact with that master data. I think, well, we're talking providers here, right? But any master data, if the group doesn't have any regular contact with the vendors or with the suppliers or with the employees, right? It's probably not the correct group to be a contributor. is there anybody in your organization other than the consumers, the high level managers who are looking at this data? Is there anybody else who really, really cares about it as part of their day-to-day operation?
Oh, for sure. I just think there's a disconnect between the people who need to be responsible for shepherding it through the system and setting up those systems versus the people who care. And it may be, I don't think it'll be simple, but this is, I guess, for me, maybe it's a question of me bringing this forward, because we're just starting our data governance effort. We've had it for a while, but it's really been not what we're talking about here, like really governing the data as opposed to, something that's a little more hand wavy. So maybe this is just, for me, a great use case to bring it forward and say, okay, this is what I'm talking about that we need to be focused on, because I don't know how else to bring it together. So it's a good use case for this.
Yeah. Do you have an executive sponsor for this project?
We do, yeah. Not for this particular, for data governance in general. For this particular thing, it's been always the case, and it's had iterative improvements. But so that is not a project at this point. It's sort of fallen by the wayside, and everyone's accepted it, but it's still not very good. So I think the executive sponsors of the data governance group could take this on and say, okay, this is something that we should be focusing on through the lens of data governance, whereas before it was always seen as an operational problem.
Ah, okay. And I mean, it is exactly what it is. And operational problems with data are data governance issues, right?
Yep.
If there's a problem with the data, maybe it's a data literacy issue where, people will collect the data that they need. And I'm going to make a very bold statement. Sometimes the people who are actually collecting data are the ones who have the least stake in it, the people on the front lines, and they don't necessarily have a stake in it other than, getting that piece of the business operation to complete, So there may be needs for data that go beyond that, it's an organizational priority, but what's in it for me, because I don't need this data in order to get my job done. So it could be a data literacy issue where, people just don't recognize what a critical role it is. I'm just a data entry person. Heck no, it's a critical role, because that's where all of the decisions of the organization start. I would see if that data governance committee would be interested in this, or if they would want to appoint an executive sponsor, somebody to say, yes, this will be done. Somebody that you can escalate these issues to, because, like I keep saying, it's people, it's process, and then technology is teeny tiny.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're connected in LinkedIn. Shoot me a message. See how you're doing.
All right. Thank you.
It also becomes sometimes, is the timing right for the organization? Because like I said, it took an adverse event for us to really, double down and get it done, and get the resources assigned. So,
right.
Sorry, I don't have a definitive answer. I mean, the answer is take it up as far as you can go, take it up the chain and see if you could find an executive who can get excited about it.
Right. Don't apologize. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Let's see. So Hasna said, yes, I have always trained and rotated front-end revenue cycle staff to correct their mistakes. Yes, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the chat, Hasna has a very, I'm sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, it's important to have some ownership. It's important to have accountability. And that's what happens, you know, with the information governor process, right? The information governor is that's where the buck stops. You know, so if the data are bad, then it's the information governor who is accountable for that. And if we need to be able to do some training, then we should be able to do some training. We should get those resources. All right, anything else? He says, while looking at the chat window, waiting for something to pop up. All right, so my monthly acknowledgements, as always, Terry Michael from ClearSense, who has been instrumental in our program. Mark Cesaro, who is my partner in crime, or maybe I'm his sidekick, who has been able to get our program up and running and get that excitement from the executives. And the Gartner Group, which is a terrific source of research on just about any IT topic. So our next sessions, our last one, data quality management on June 16th. And what we're going to be talking about is, what does it mean to have quality data? You know, I think a lot of people can say, oh, yes, we need quality data, but they might have a little bit of difficulty in expressing what that is. How do you know that your data has quality? And of course, it comes down to, is it fit for the purpose that you're looking for? There is a science behind data quality, and there are some categorizations. We're going to talk about the profiling of data, and we're going to talk about, and I've been very careful to avoid mentioning names, but I do want to talk about tools and technology, because it can greatly enhance what you can do for data quality. You know, the tools will do in a few hours what it would take a team of people 3 months to do. And then again, you know, the roles, the responsibilities, how data quality fits in with the data governance organization, and how it interacts with the information governors and the data stewards. All right. Anything else? Yeah, we got a little conversation going on in the chat, and I'm really hesitant to kill the meeting while there's conversation going on. All right. I have 5:54 p.m. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next month.